There was a time when a small whisper could change a city and a single spark could start a movement. That was the power of the tipping point. But now, in a world shaped by deep networks, viral influence, and invisible engineers of behavior, the stakes are no longer about a product catching fire or a trend going mainstream. Today, it's about who controls the flame. In Revenge of the Tipping Point, Malcolm Gladwell returns to his most iconic theory, not to repeat it, but to expose how it has been hijacked, upgraded, and weaponized in the age of social engineering. This isn't just a book about influence. It's a field guide to the modern battlefield of minds. Gladwell begins by reminding us of the simplicity behind the original tipping point. Concept of phenomenon reaches critical mass and suddenly cascades into the mainstream. But what happens when entire industries, tech giants, and even governments learn to artificially induce those tipping points for their own gain? What happens when the spread isn't organic but engineered? This is the central question driving his investigation. The first part of the book dives into what Gladwell calls overstories. These are the dominant narratives shaping our collective perceptions, the cultural scripts that live above our heads and quietly manipulate our understanding of what is normal, true, or important. Overstories are not individual messages, but metastories often invisible, that influence millions without their awareness. Think of the belief that hard work always pays off, or that social media connects us more than it isolates us. These overstories are curated, not accidental. Gladwell explores how media corporations, tech platforms, and powerful think tanks deliberately frame these overstories to push certain agendas and marginalize others. He illustrates this with the rise of grind culture in startup ecosystems, showing how the glorification of hustle was not an organic movement but a top-down myth propagated by venture capital interests who benefit from overworked and underpaid labor. But where overstories create the narrative sky, superspreaders operate on the ground. These are the individuals, algorithms, and systems that accelerate the reach of messages far beyond their natural bounds. Gladwell breaks from the traditional view of influencers and dives into how superspreaders today are rarely people. They are often algorithmic amplifiers programmed to maximize engagement and outrage. Platforms like TikTok, Facebook, and X, not neutral pipelines of information, they are engineered engines of virality that can manipulate public sentiment at scale. Gladwell uses real-world examples like the viral spread of misinformation during health crises and political uprisings, showing how certain narratives were not merely lucky, they were boosted strategically by superspreaders designed to favor chaos, emotion, and division. Then Gladwell takes a darker turn into the rise of social engineering. This is where the revenge in the title truly comes alive. Social engineering, once a term reserved for psychological manipulation or cybersecurity scams, is now a dominant force in public discourse. It's the deliberate shaping of human behavior through design, environment, nudges, and digital architecture. Gladwell connects the dots between Silicon Valley behavioral economists, data scientists, and UX designers who craft entire digital ecosystems with one goal: make users predictable, make behavior programmable. Apps use intermittent rewards to simulate addiction cycles. News feeds are personalized to keep you inside an ideological bubble. Notifications are timed to exploit loneliness and boredom. What seems like innocent convenience is actually a matrix of influence. He gives chilling examples of this manipulation in practice. From political campaigns deploying micro-targeted ads to shift voter sentiment, to online platforms that tweak a few lines of code and cause entire demographics to change purchasing behavior overnight. In one of the book's most jarring chapters, Gladwell interviews former insiders from major tech firms who reveal just how much of our behavior is orchestrated without our consent. A former data engineer from a leading social media company admits, "We didn't care what you believed, we only cared that you kept believing something." In other words, belief isn't about truth anymore. It's about stickiness. It's about control. Throughout the book, Gladwell ties these themes together with the idea that the tipping point, once a hopeful, almost magical concept, has now become a tool of control. We used to wait for the moment when something great finally caught fire. Now people with power manufacture those moments in secret labs of digital behavior, emotional analysis, and mass data collection. The tipping point has become a target, and once reached, it no longer belongs to the people. It belongs to the system that pushed it. One of the most powerful sections explores narrative laundering. This is the process by which a false or controversial idea is legitimized through layers of repetition and strategic endorsement. A fringe theory is shared by bots, picked up by niche influencers, covered by a partisan news site, then eventually cited by a mainstream outlet as a viral topic. At that point, the idea has gone through enough filters to seem valid, even if it started as a lie. Gladwell calls this the infection loop, a closed system of validation that tricks people into trusting manipulated narratives. The result is that falsehoods become facts, not because they're true, but because they're everywhere. As the book progresses, Gladwell shifts from explanation to implication. What does it mean to live in a world where nearly every thought, belief, and desire might have been placed there by someone else's algorithm? What does freedom mean when your options are determined by predictive data models? He introduces the concept of soft cages, digital enclosures that don't force you to act but gently shape your every move. You're not locked in, but you're being led, one suggestion at a time. And the scariest part, you think you're choosing it. Gladwell's prose is, as always, compelling and sharp. He weaves complex concepts with accessible storytelling, which meet whistleblowers, behavioral psychologists, startup founders, and even conspiracy theorists whose lives serve as case studies of how tipping points are engineered in the modern age. One memorable story follows a teenage girl in California who became a viral face of a protest movement without her consent. Her image was captured, reframed, and redistributed thousands of times across platforms with messages she never said. She became the symbol of a cause she never joined. That, Gladwell argues, is the new power of the tipping point. It no longer needs your participation, only your data. But the book is not entirely bleak. In the final chapters, Gladwell explores how awareness itself can be a form of resistance. He points to decentralized media, algorithm-free platforms, and emerging digital literacy programs as signs that not all is lost. The key, he argues, is not to unplug from the system entirely, but to understand it deeply enough that you're no longer its puppet. He proposes the idea of tipping back, creating intentional tipping points that serve community over capital, truth over clickbait, and empathy over manipulation. Gladwell ends the book with a quiet warning. He says, "We are not in an information war. We are in a behavior war. The battlefield is not the mind, but the habit. The enemy is not misinformation, but misdirection. And the most dangerous part, the weapon looks like a feed, a ping, a perfectly timed ad. The tipping point hasn't disappeared. It's just changed hands." Revenge of the Tipping Point is a masterclass in modern influence. It's a wake-up call for anyone who believes their choices are entirely their own. And it's a mirror held up to a society that once celebrated the spark of new ideas but now lives under the shadow of engineered virality. If you think you're immune to manipulation, think again. If you believe you're the one choosing what to watch, read, or believe, this book will challenge everything. And if you still romanticize the internet as a place of connection and truth, this might just be the most important audiobook you'll ever listen to. Link in description.